The rain fell in a steady drizzle, casting a shimmering glow on the neon-lit streets of New Vega City. Crowds moved with purpose, faces hidden under hoods and umbrellas, their silhouettes blurred by the flickering lights of holographic advertisements. Among them, Rico watched from the shadow of an alley. His cybernetic eyes scanned the street, data streaming across his vision. Possible targets flickered in red outlines. Couples, workers, shoppers, none of them worth the risk. Then he spotted him. Boy. Young, small, and distracted. Kofi. The kid hummed to himself, tapping his fingers on his backpack strap, unaware of anything beyond his conversation with a large dog walking beside him. The dog, a sleek, muscular beast with short black fur, moved with a precision that didn't match the aimless nature of a regular pet. His eyes glowed faint blue, scanning their surroundings every few seconds. A genetic mod, no doubt. Expensive but not a threat. Rico's gaze locked on the boy's backpack. Had weight. Something valuable, maybe electronics or portable tech. Kids these days carried more in their bags than they realized. Easy pickings. His lips curled into a grin. Perfect, he muttered, his breath curling into mist. Kofi walked along the cracked sidewalk, his voice light and carefree. You think they'll let me pilot a real ship one day, Bako? Bet I could. I got all the right scores today. His smile was big, proud. He glanced at his dog, whose ears perked up but stayed focused on the street ahead. Yeah, I know I gotta keep my head in the present like Mom says. But still, wouldn't it be cool? Bako let out a low rumbling woof, his gaze shifting briefly toward the alley. Kofi noticed. What's up, boy? He asked, glancing in the same direction. The alley looked empty. Trash bins. Vain. Shadows. Nothing to see. You're always paranoid, Kofi chuckled, nudging Bako playfully. Relax. But Bako didn't relax. His gaze lingered. Rico's fingers moved to the side of his temple, tapping a control node embedded just under the skin. His eyes flickered green, activating his neural disruptor. A pulse fired out, invisible to human senses but sharp as a scream to Bako's neural implants. The dog's legs locked mid-step. His eyes flashed red, flickering wildly before dimming. He froze like a glitching machine, muscles taut and unmoving. Bako! Kofi stopped, crouching in front of his dog. He shook him. Hey, what's wrong? Come on, buddy. Panic edged his voice. He didn't see Rico approaching from behind. A hand clamped over Kofi's mouth. Kid, don't make this hard. Rico's voice was low, dangerous, and close to his ear. Kofi thrashed, kicking and clawing, but Rico's grip was steel. The boy's scream was muffled, a sound lost in the rain and noise of the city. Shut it, Rico growled, hauling Kofi backward toward the alley. Don't make me hurt you, kid. Kofi fought harder, but Rico's grip didn't budge. The boy tried to bite his hand, but Rico only snorted in annoyance. Feisty, huh? Don't worry, kid. I ain't here to hurt you. He glanced down at the backpack, his eyes narrowing. Just need to see what's in there. Bako's eyes flickered again. Red, blue, red. His rigid frame trembled as the neural override struggled to maintain control. Then something shifted. System override detected. Restoring primary function. The message scrolled across Bako's vision. His breathing returned, slow at first, then sharp and deliberate. His muscles twitched, claws flexed. His eyes locked on Rico's heat signature, tracking every move. Kofi's muffled cries echoed in Bako's audio feed. His eyes flashed bright red. His HUD displayed a single directive: protect the human. The shift was immediate. Bako's legs uncoiled with violent force. His claws dug into the ground, scraping concrete. The soft whir of his internal motors went silent as his pursuit mode engaged. His movements were smooth, precise, deadly. No hesitation. Rico didn't hear him, didn't know. He was too focused on dragging Kofi into the alley. His breathing grew heavier as the boy's resistance wore him down. Come on, stop fighting. I'm not after you, just your stuff. He tossed a glance over his shoulder, expecting to see an empty street. Instead he saw Bako, bounding, silent, predator in motion. What the? Rico barely had time to react before Bako closed the distance. In the half-second it took him to process the incoming threat, Bako was already airborne, jaws wide. Rico spun, his instincts sharp from years of street life, and threw up his arm. Bako's jaws clamped down on metal and flesh. Sparks flew as his titanium-enhanced teeth crunched through Rico's cybernetic limb like brittle glass. Rico's scream echoed through the alley, sharp and high like a siren. He staggered backward, pain and panic flooding his system. Get off me! He slammed his free hand against Bako's head, but it was like punching stone. The dog's eyes glowed crimson. His growl so deep it seemed to come from the bones of the earth. Kofi, still gasping for breath, stumbled away, eyes wide with shock. Bako! Bako, stop! At the sound of Kofi's voice, Bako released Rico's arm, letting him fall to the ground. Sparks jumped from the shredded limb, fingers twitching like broken wires. Rico cradled his arm, his face twisted in agony. He scooted back, eyes wild with terror, locked on the dog. You freakin' machine, he spat, his voice cracked with pain. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape. It's just a dog, he muttered to himself. It's just a dog. Bako took slow, deliberate steps toward him. Each step echoed in the rain. Each step was measured, patient, controlled. His eyes stayed locked on Rico, red like burning coals. No, stay back. Rico crawled away, breath hitching in panic. Stay back, you piece of scrap. But Bako didn't stop. His eyes scanned Rico's face, mapping his fear, his breathing patterns, his every movement. Bako, Kofi called softly, stepping forward. His small hands tugged at the dog's collar. It's okay, buddy. I'm okay. The shift was sudden. Bako's eyes dimmed from red to soft blue. His breathing eased. The growl died in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head to Kofi, scanning him from head to toe. No injuries detected. His ears flicked, acknowledging Kofi's voice as he let out a soft huff of air, almost like a sigh. You're okay, buddy, Kofi said, wiping his face. You did good. His small arms wrapped around Bako's thick neck, burying his face into his fur. You did good. Bako lowered his head, letting Kofi hold him. His eyes scanned the area once more, tracking Rico as he stumbled away, clutching his ruined arm. The dog didn't chase. He didn't have to. His mission was complete. Threat neutralized, Bako's internal system confirmed in a monotone, then added human status. Safe. Rain continued to fall, washing away the blood, sparks and tears. Rico sat slumped against the cold metal wall, his breaths shallow and ragged. His leg throbbed with searing pain, blood pooling beneath him in slow, widening circles. His once cocky grin was gone, replaced by the blank stare of someone who had seen the end too closely. His eyes tracked Bako, every movement precise, every step deliberate. You don't have to do this, Rico muttered, his voice cracking. His gaze flicked to Kofi, who was still rubbing his wrists where the ropes had cut into his skin. The boy leaned against Bako, his face buried in the dog's thick, rain-damp fur. Rico's lips twitched into a bitter smile. It's just a dog, kid. Don't care about you. It's just followin' code. Kofi raised his head, his eyes sharp, unflinching. You don't know anything about him. Rico snorted, but it sounded more like a wheeze. Yeah, I do, kid. I know exactly how they're built. I know what they're for. He tapped the side of his head with 2 fingers, wincing as the movement jolted his injured arm. Code is code. Doesn't matter how pretty you dress it up. It does what it's told, no more, no less. It ain't loyalty, kid. It's programming. Bako's eyes flicked to him, glowing a steady blue, calm but watchful. His ears twitched at every sound. Rain dripping. Metal creaking. The slow, uneven thump of Rico's heartbeat. He's not just code, Kofi shot back, his voice stronger now. He pulled away from Bako and took a step forward, his small frame standing taller than it had before. He's more than that. You don't get it because you're a coward. You think everybody leaves. You think everybody breaks. But Bako didn't leave me. He came back. Rico's eyes darted to Bako, his breathing quickening. He licked his dry lips, eyes flicking to the plasma knife lying a few feet away on the floor. It still buzzed faintly, its glow dim but steady. His fingers twitched. Calculations ran through his mind. Distance, timing, risk. Listen, kid, Rico said, his voice soft, almost pleading. I'm not your enemy. I was just trying to survive. Same as you. I didn't mean for it to go this far, yeah? You get that, don't you? He nodded slowly, his eyes locked on Kofi's, face twisting into something that might have passed for sincerity. I made a mistake. You get it, right? People make mistakes. Kofi didn't move. Didn't answer. Come on, kid, Rico pressed, his voice cracking under the weight of his own fear. Just call him off. Tell him to stand down. I'll walk away. You'll never see me again. You got my word. He glanced at Bako, his hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. I'm no threat. See? No weapons. Nothing. The plasma knife flickered on the floor. Kofi's eyes shifted to it, then back to Rico. You hurt me, Kofi said quietly. You tried to take me. Rico's grin vanished. His face hardened into something uglier, more familiar. His eyes narrowed into sharp, calculating slits. Yeah, and I'll do worse if you don't tell that mutt to back off. He pushed himself up to one knee, wincing at the pain in his leg but never taking his eyes off Kofi. Last chance, kid. Off. Bako's head tilted slightly, his eyes still on Rico. His posture shifted, lowering just a fraction, his weight settling into his haunches like a coiled spring. Rico saw it. He knew what it meant. Don't do it, Rico hissed, raising a hand. Don't you dare. Silence. Kofi didn't blink. Bako. Bako's eyes flickered red for one brief moment. Then he moved. A blur of black muscle and claws, faster than Rico's reflexes could match. The thief lunged for the plasma knife, his fingers just brushing the handle before Bako was on him. A snarl ripped through the air, sharp and wild, and the two figures collided in a violent tumble. Metal clanged. Sparks shot from Rico's cybernetic arm as Bako's jaws clamped down on it, crunching through wire and servos with mechanical precision. Get off me! Rico screamed, his voice high and ragged. He thrashed, his free hand pounding on Bako's head, but it was like punching stone. Sparks danced in the dim light as Bako twisted his head, pulling Rico's arm at an angle it wasn't meant to bend. The sound of metal shearing echoed in the warehouse, followed by Rico's scream, sharp and shrill. His arm fell limp. Dead weight. Useless. Stop, 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 he yelled, his eyes wide with terror, face twisted in pain. I give up. I give up. Bako released his arm and stepped back, his chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. His eyes stayed locked on Rico, never looking away, never blinking. His lips curled just slightly, teeth faintly bared. Rico clutched his broken arm to his chest, tears streaking down his face, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. His eyes flicked to Kofi, wild with desperation. Call him off, please. I'm done, you win. I'll walk away. You'll never see me again, I swear it. Kofi stepped closer, slowly, his eyes calm but cold. He crouched down, his gaze level with Rico's, close enough to see every bruise, every bead of sweat on the man's face. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. You were wrong, Kofi said quietly, his voice like steel. Loyalty is real. You just don't have it. Rico's face crumpled, tears mixing with rain and blood. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Kofi's eyes shifted to Bako. We're done here, buddy. Let's go home. Bako tilted his head at Kofi, his gaze softening. The glow in his eyes faded from red to blue, calm and steady. He padded over to Kofi's side, his claws clicking softly against the concrete. Kofi reached down, running his fingers through Bako's fur. The dog leaned into him, warm and steady like a heartbeat. They turned their backs on Rico. The man's breaths were uneven, ragged gasps that echoed in the empty space. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He just sat there, cradling his broken arm, eyes hollow as he watched them walk away. Rain dripped through cracks in the warehouse ceiling, tapping softly against the concrete. It was the only sound left.